Black Myth Wukong reviews are out today. The game comes out on Tuesday. And right now the game is sitting at about an 81 on Metacritic. The Screen Rant review is getting a lot of heat, and I want to talk about it briefly. I will say that this is probably one of the most confusing reviews I've ever read. It is not a poorly written review. There's some smart analysis of gameplay in here, but editorially speaking, this should not have been published, in my opinion, because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. The number one thing certain gamers are upset about is the whole diversity stuff that this author goes into. We'll talk about that in just a second, but it's part of a bigger confusion of what this review is. This is a review that gives the game a 3 out of 5. It says if a patch is released, if changes are made, they aren't specific about what the changes are, they could see bumping the score up to about a 3.5. Okay. But then the review goes in to say, and this is where it gets really confusing. It says the game, and this is a PC version of the game, PS5 codes were not released for this game. And that should worry console players, especially after this review and somewhat similar reviews. Although I haven't seen a review that hammers the technical issues of this game like this one. But they're saying it's pretty much unplayable. They're saying there are massive frame rate problems. There are audio desync problems, stuttering problems, and that is running it on the recommended specs. They say after chapter 2, it becomes unplayable unless you drop it down to the minimal settings, and it's still barely playable after chapter 2. Okay. So the elephant in the room is, wait, what? You're giving a game a 3 out of 5, but it's barely playable. That's what I mean by this being confusing. I don't understand this review. And then it gets into the diversity stuff. And the diversity stuff is even more confusing only because in the review, the author, and now it's being credited to the team, but there were actual seemingly physical and or death threats, I guess would be the same thing, to the female writer of this piece, which is pathetic. I don't know. Whatever. It's a different topic, but most gamers are great. Maybe our fandom attracts the really bad people more than other fandoms. Maybe this is spread out equally across all fandoms, but my God, man, if this upsets you that much, come the fuck on, dude. If your personal self-esteem, if your self-esteem is tied into a goddamn way the world responds to a fucking video game you're hyped for, I'm not judging you like you're a loser. I'm saying you need therapy and you need medicine because you have a great life waiting for you. It just hasn't started yet. Trust me. This is not normal. But anyway, she writes about the diversity. I got no problem with reviewers as long as they're clear up front. And she is saying, look, I'm reviewing this through this filter. And yeah, it's going to tie into an aggregate score, and that may piss you off because not everybody reviews things that way. But she's clear about it. She's saying, I'm coming to the art with my own shit, just like everybody comes to art with their own shit. You play Gran Turismo and love it maybe because you grew up with cars and your dad and it's nostalgia and it's a great game. I don't give a fuck about cars, right? What we bring to that game will affect our enjoyment of it, our response to it. And as long as we're clear on that, and she's clear on it, that's great. And this is a studio, Game Science, that made this game that has a history of being, making misogynistic and sexist statements. And there are a number of accusations about the studio itself not being the kindest place to work unless you are kind of one of the alphas, whatever that means in that particular case at that studio. And so I get why her guard is up. And I also get why she says, I don't see any women in this game. And that bothers me. You know, there are women in the Monkey King story, Journey to the West, and I don't see any of them. Now, but this is where the review gets weird again, because she says in the first 2 chapters, I don't see any women. And there are women in the story or females in the story, and maybe the developer has moved them around where they come in, or maybe as is their right, they've said, we don't want any women in this game. This is a no girls allowed clubhouse. Who the fuck knows? Who the fuck cares? They have a right to do it, and she has a right to call them out on it. What's weird is she says up until chapter 2, which makes me go, did you play past chapter 2? If you didn't, because the frame rate and because the technical issues were so awful, I respect that. Say that in your review. But if you're going to basically ding a game in part because of the lack of diversity reflected on the screen up to chapter 2, that's a very weird specific thing. It's like the game gets really diverse after chapter 3, but those first 2 chapters, and I don't think that's what she's saying. But then she's clearly, if that's the case, then is she saying she only played to chapter 2 and then it pretty much was unplayable, at which point that's fine too, but then why are you giving it a 3 out of 5? The way she describes it, it sounds like this is going to be another Cyberpunk for Sony, whereas this is not going to be anything worth buying, and you're going to be getting a lot of refunds when this thing hits PlayStation 5, which is probably why there are no codes for review, and the game comes out Tuesday for PS5. I get that, but I'm just, this whole thing, I think if anybody's complaining about this review, I don't have a problem with her diversity stuff. She that's her right to do it. She made it clear. Case closed. Do with that what you want. She has a right to not like the game because she doesn't like the developer, as long as she makes it clear. More importantly, I separate the art from the artist, but she's saying that even that, the art itself is not diverse enough for her. That's fair too. But what's weird is I don't know what she played, and if what the article text is saying is true, it is disqualifying. You don't give this game a 3 out of 5. How in the fuck? That's the problem with this review, not the other stuff, in my opinion. So I don't get what's going on with this fucking game. And here's the other question. If it is, I mean, seriously, everybody got the same code. She's saying they played their game at the recommended specs. So you're telling me IGN that gave it an 8, GameSpot that gave it an 8, some people that gave it a 7, some people that gave it a 100, they were just okay with that? Or were they playing at the recommended specs and said it sucked and we cranked it up to 20 times more? I have no idea. So if you're the editor of this review, protect your writers. People are assholes. It's not acceptable. And at the same time, recognize that you have a review up right now that is well written in parts. It's analytical. It talks about some of the negatives of the game that are like, yeah, makes me go, you know, the placement of the shrines, the lack of environment interaction. It does seem like it's pretty combat heavy and less about exploring and all that stuff, at least according to some of the reviews, including this one. The review itself seems pretty solid. The issue is it contradicts itself in a handful of very key ways. If you're the editor, that's what I would be worried about today after you making sure your people are safe, is this review is, as a product, it's shit. Maybe it gets better after chapter 2. You get it? Because what I'm doing is taking the chapter 2 concept and applying it to this, because they released a shitty product too. Wink.